I signed away my land with trembling hands, trusting my only son. My name is Linda. I'm 57, and after my husband passed, the land behind our farmhouse became my anchor. The soil had known my grief, my work, and my hope. Mark, my only child, told me it was time to protect what his father built. "Just a formality," he said. I wanted to believe that. The lawyer nodded, the pen scratched, and a seal pressed down with a soft click. The paper felt rough under my fingertips, like bark stripped of its skin. Afterwards, I made coffee and watched the light fall across the kitchen. The old clock ticked its slow rhythm, and I thought of harvests past, of laughter drifting through open windows. It was quiet now, but the quiet didn't hurt then. I imagined Mark walking the fields as a caretaker, not an heir. "It'll be safe," he'd promised, pouring a little warmth into the lie I hadn't yet seen. 2 weeks later, a silver truck stopped by the fence. A man in a reflective vest waved. "Ma'am, I'm here to survey the new property lines." He unfolded a document stamped with my address. My heart thudded once, then twice, a slow echo of disbelief. My name wasn't on it. I took the paper from his hand, my eyes tracing the unfamiliar signature. Claire Walker, Mark's wife. I called Mark immediately. "Why is her name on my land deed?" He chuckled. "It's temporary, Mom. Relax. It says she's the owner. It's a formality. You wouldn't understand the legal part." Something in his voice shifted, patience turning to condescension. The warmth drained from the air. "Mark, you said it was for protection." "And it is," he replied. "You don't need to worry about it." But I did. I hung up and sat on the porch, feeling the rough wood under my palms. The paper trembled in my hand. The land stretched out before me, gold and forgiving, but I felt shut out from it, as if every blade of grass had turned its back. That evening, I walked the field alone, the sky bruised purple over the wheat. I bent to pick up a small stone, rubbing it between my fingers the way I used to when my husband and I planned each boundary. "It's still ours," I whispered. Yet the words rang hollow. The ring on my finger, dull and scratched, caught a shard of light. I remembered when Mark had been small, helping me plant saplings. He'd said, "Someday I'll take care of all this." I hadn't thought he'd mean it this way. By morning, rumors stirred. Claire was telling people they were expanding, new ventures, new money. I heard her laugh over the phone when I called again. "You're overreacting," she said. "It's just business." "Business?" My voice cracked. "This is my life, Claire." She sighed. "Then maybe it's time to let go." Her tone was honey-sweet and final. I hung up without another word. The folder with the deed sat on the kitchen table, the notary's seal catching the light. I ran my hand over it, feeling the embossed ridge. That paper was supposed to secure my peace. Instead, it chained me to doubt. At sunset, I stood by the fence line, watching the wind roll over the wheat. The horizon bled orange into shadow. I realized how fragile trust really is, how a single signature can turn love into leverage. The air smelled faintly of soil and old promises, and in that stillness, I understood the truth. My land wasn't mine anymore. Claire called it an investment for the future. Her voice had that soft, polished tone people use when they're trying to sound reasonable. The spa she'd opened shimmered with glass and marble, all fragrance and shine. I stood by the counter, clutching my old coffee mug from home, the one with faded roses on it, and looked at her reflection in the mirror behind the reception desk. It wasn't the mirror that made me uneasy. It was how confidently she owned the space that had been paid for with my land. When I asked how they managed it, she smiled. "We needed collateral," she said lightly. "It's all family, you know." The words felt rehearsed, almost kind. I didn't respond right away. I could still smell the ink from the bank forms I'd signed the week before. It lingered on my hands like guilt. "You used the farm," I said. My voice came out quieter than I meant. Claire tilted her head. "We're all benefiting, aren't we?" she said. "You'll see. It's just a step forward." I nodded, pretending to understand. but something in her eyes, something quick and dismissive, made my stomach twist. She turned to a client, already done with me. The hum of the spa's machines filled the air, too clean, too artificial. At the bank, the loan officer looked nervous when I asked about the deed. He pretended to shuffle papers before lowering his voice. "You'll need to speak with your son, ma'am." I watched his eyes flick to his manager's office. That glance said more than his words ever could. I asked again, slower this time. "Did he take out a loan against it?" He hesitated. "Yes, there was a withdrawal last week, $420,000, signed under his authority." For a moment I couldn't breathe. My name wasn't on anything anymore. The paper that once represented security had turned into a weapon in someone else's hand. When I got home, the sun was setting through the window, catching on the mug beside the sink. I stared at it, remembering how Mark had once teased me for holding on to old things. I used to laugh. Now the sight of it made me ache. I called him. "Mark, we need to talk." He answered casually, as if nothing was wrong. "About what?" "I went to the bank. You took out a loan on the property." He exhaled, impatient. "You gifted it, Mom. You said you didn't need it anymore." "I trusted you," I said. "You still can," he replied. "It's just business, okay? Don't turn this into drama." "Drama?" My voice shook. "You took everything your father built. You took what he died working for." He laughed softly. "Don't start guilt-tripping me. You'll be fine. We'll make the money back." "I don't want your money," I said. "Then what do you want?" he asked, his tone sharp now. "I want my home back." He hung up. The silence afterward felt heavier than the words that had come before it. I sat at the table, staring at the stack of papers I'd brought from the bank. They didn't look dangerous, just black ink on white, but they were proof of everything I'd lost. I traced one line with my finger, the way I might trace the edge of a scar. It hit me then. He wasn't protecting me. He was protecting himself. The room seemed smaller, the air stale. I opened the window, hoping for a little relief. Outside, the reflection of the house glimmered faintly in the darkened glass, just as it had in Claire's mirror earlier that day. I barely recognized it. For years, I'd believed that love meant sacrifice. Now, I saw it could also mean surrender, and I'd given too much of both. That night, as the clock on the wall marked each slow second, I made up my mind. The only way to stop this spiral was to face it head on. I would no longer wait for explanations or apologies that would never come. I called the lawyer that same night. "You can't undo a gift," he said flatly. His tone carried no malice, just weary certainty. The lawyer's office smelled of polish and old paper, and every clock on the wall ticked at a slightly different rhythm. It was the kind of sound that made silence feel like punishment. I stared at the document he slid across the desk. My own signature looked foreign to me, the ink too dark, the strokes too firm. He pointed to a line buried halfway down the page. "Clause 14, he said. "No revocation under goodwill. It means once you gave it, you can't take it back." I tried to breathe evenly. "So it's gone?" He nodded once. "Unless you can prove fraud." That word landed like a stone in my chest. "Fraud?" He leaned back, watching me. "Was there deception involved before you signed? Anything misrepresented? You'd need clear evidence." I thought of Mark's voice that day, warm, casual, assuring. He said it was for protection. He said it was temporary. "That's not protection," he replied. "That's persuasion." I folded my hands to stop the tremor. "He's my son," I said quietly. "He wouldn't—" The lawyer's expression didn't change. "He would, if he had reason." He tapped the page. "Most cases like this start with debt or desperation." That's when the truth cracked open. Claire's spa, the glossy walls, the way she avoided my eyes when I'd asked where the money came from. I remembered the $420,000 loan slip I'd seen at the bank and how easily they'd brushed me aside. "Do you think he's sold it already?" I asked. "Not yet," he said. "But I'd wager that's the plan. If it's tied to her business, He may be trying to cover losses. It's happened before. I felt heat rise in my face. I'd believed every word my son said because mothers are trained to trust. I looked down again at the paper, that small clause sitting like a trap between ordinary sentences. My own name felt like evidence against me. The lawyer slid another form forward. You can file a complaint. It'll open an inquiry. But I'll warn you, it's a heavy road. It means turning this into a case. I hesitated. The clock on the wall struck 4, and the echo filled the room. What happens if I don't? He paused, his eyes kind now. Then you lose everything. Not just the land. Your leverage, your rights, your standing, all of it. I stared at the window, at the weak daylight bleeding through blinds. He planned it, I whispered. He must have known I'd sign without reading. The lawyer didn't answer. He didn't have to. I picked up the pen he'd left near the edge of the desk. It felt heavy in my hand, the same way it had when I'd first trusted Mark. The paper waited. I thought of my husband, how he'd worked until his hands were cracked to build that farm. I thought of how Mark had grown up in those fields, running between the rows of corn, promising me one day he'd take care of it all. And now, here I was, fighting to reclaim the life I'd already given away. I'll file, I said finally. The lawyer nodded. Once you sign, we begin. But know this, it will tear your family apart. I met his eyes. He already did that. The words came out steadier than I felt. I signed the complaint form, the pen gliding over the paper with slow defiance. As the ink dried, the lamp's glare caught my reflection in the glass frame above his desk. I barely recognized the woman staring back. Outside, dusk had fallen. The streetlights flickered on one by one as I stepped into the evening air. I could still hear the ticking of his office clocks echoing in my head. Every tick felt like a reminder that I'd been too late to see what was coming. I walked home alone, the folder pressed against my chest. Somewhere in town, someone would already be whispering. And by morning, my neighbors were whispering. They said I'd lost my mind. The words reached me before the truth could defend itself. At the market, whispers slid through the aisles like a draft. Faces I'd known for years turned toward each other, not toward me. I caught fragments. Poor thing. He's just protecting her. She's not well. It was astonishing how quickly sympathy could rot into suspicion. The sound of laughter drifted from behind the fence of my neighbor's yard as I unloaded groceries from the trunk. Every giggle felt rehearsed, every pause deliberate. I tried to ignore it at first. People talk. They always have. But then I saw the messages, screenshots forwarded from one neighbor to another, labeling me as unstable, harassing, even dangerous. Someone had written that I'd been wandering around, accusing my own son of theft. The cruelty was precise. I held the phone in my shaking hand, rereading the words until they blurred. That night, I stood by the window, the glow from the street lamps cutting across the yard. The fence that once marked safety now felt like a barrier between who I was and who they believed I'd become. The voices outside were louder now, laughing again, muffled but clear enough to sting. I pressed my palm to the glass, wondering how far Mark had gone to make me look small. When I confronted him, he didn't even pretend to be surprised. He was sitting at the kitchen table, scrolling through his phone like nothing mattered. "Why are people saying these things?" I asked. He didn't look up. "You shouldn't listen to gossip." "I'm the gossip, Mark," I said, trying to steady my voice. "They think I've lost my mind. Did you tell them that?" He smirked. "It's better this way. People won't bother you. They'll leave you alone." "Better for who?" "For all of us," he said. "You're just making things harder. By asking what you did. By acting like you didn't want this," he snapped. "You gave it away, Mom. Stop acting like a victim." My chest tightened. "You know that's not true." He stood up, his voice rising. "Everyone thinks you need help. Maybe they're right." I stared at him. "You started this." He walked past me, brushing my shoulder like I was in his way. The air between us turned thick and stale, filled with something I couldn't name, maybe pity, maybe disgust. The clock on the wall ticked, the sound sharp in the silence he left behind. After he was gone, I called my neighbor, the only one who'd tried to defend me earlier in the week. Her voice was low. "I told them you were fine, that you're just upset. But Claire's been visiting people, talking about your condition. She says Mark's worried you might do something rash." I closed my eyes. "Rash?" "She said you threatened to take them to court." "I didn't." "I know, but they believe her." I thanked her, though I didn't feel grateful. I hung up and stood in the dark kitchen. The refrigerator hummed faintly, the only sound that didn't judge me. For the first time, I realized I was being erased in real time, not just from paper deeds, but from people's memories of who I was. Days passed, each one heavier than the last. At this grocery store, conversation stopped when I entered. At church, people offered smiles that didn't reach their eyes. Even the mailman avoided small talk. I became a ghost inside my own town. I tried to keep my head down, but the laughter behind the fence never stopped. It became a rhythm, part of my evenings, mocking, endless. My neighbor waved once, an apology in her eyes, before turning away when someone called her name. I couldn't blame her. Nobody wants to choose sides in a family war, but the lies had already chosen for them. I sat on the porch one afternoon, holding the phone that had delivered those messages, wondering how much further Mark and Claire would go to keep me silent. The stakes were no longer just about land. They were about truth. If I didn't fight back soon, I'd lose that too. The wind picked up, rattling the fence. I looked toward the mailbox, and that's when I saw it. An envelope wedged against the gate, stamped with the county seal. My stomach dropped as I reached for it. Then a letter arrived from the county office. They were planning to rezone my home for commercial use. The notice was pinned crookedly to my gate, the paper trembling in the wind. I tore it free and felt the cold metal of the mailbox handle as I steadied myself. The seal at the bottom carried the county's stamp, clean and official. Words like rezoning and wellness lodging blurred together until one line snapped into focus. Applicant, Claire Walker. I read it twice. My hands went numb. She was turning my home, my husband's land, into part of her spa business. I drove to City Hall that same morning. The building smelled faintly of bleach and paper, that bureaucratic mix that always meant someone else's rules were about to decide your life. A planner behind the counter barely looked up when I slid the notice toward him. "There must be a mistake," I said. "This property isn't commercial." He typed something without meeting my eyes. "Says here it was transferred to a private owner 6 months ago." "I didn't sell it." He shrugged. "Well, she did." "Claire Walker?" "Yes, ma'am, the owner." "She's my daughter-in-law." "That doesn't change anything," he said, his tone flat. "It's perfectly legal. The new owner applied for rezoning, using my home." He gave a sympathetic smile that wasn't sympathy at all. "You can file an objection if you want. It probably won't stop it, but it'll go on record." That word, record, sounded like a death sentence. I left the building shaking, gripping the notice so tightly it creased. Outside, the sun glared against the glass doors, reflecting my face back at me. I looked older, smaller. In the car, I opened my phone and saw a message waiting. "Mark, stop embarrassing us." I read it again and again as if the meaning might soften. But it didn't. Embarrassing. That's what my fight for my own home had become. To him, to her, to everyone else who wanted this quiet. I wanted to scream. Instead, I drove home in silence, the road stretching out like a long, thin punishment. The fields on either side looked the same as they always had, but I felt like I was trespassing on my own past. At home, I laid the notice on the kitchen table beside the old property file I'd kept in a drawer for years. The pages were worn, the corners soft from decades of handling. I opened it to the old survey map. The handwriting, my husband's notes, was still there in faded blue ink. Boundaries, soil quality. even a note about where to plant the next row of trees. I ran my finger over the ink, tracing his writing. That land had been his life, and now it was a business plan. When Mark's name lit up my phone again, I hesitated before answering. "Why are you doing this?" I asked. He sighed like I was a burden. "Mom, it's not about you. This is progress. Claire's building something that helps people." "By stealing what's mine?" He laughed under his breath. "You gave it to me. I'm just letting her use it. You should be proud." "Proud?" I whispered. "You're selling the last piece of your father." "You're being dramatic," he said, his patience thinning. "This is good for everyone. You don't even use the place anymore." "I live here." He went quiet for a second. "Then maybe it's time to move on." The line went dead. I stared at the phone, feeling every word settle like dust. My pulse thudded in my ears, slow and heavy. I looked again at the paper on the table. The seal, the signature, the sterile phrasing that made theft sound lawful. I walked outside and stood by the gate. The handle was cold in my hand, grounding me. My neighbor waved from across the road, half smiling, pretending not to notice the notice still hanging by a torn corner. For a long moment I thought about giving up, but then I remembered the lawyer's words, the one truth that had cut through all the noise. "You can fight this, but it'll cost you." I'd already lost too much not to fight. I went inside, pulled out a notepad, and began to write my formal objection, slowly, deliberately, every letter of my name clear and certain. This time, I wasn't signing anything away. They summoned me for a public hearing. They postponed the meeting minutes before it began. I'd arrived early, clutching my folder of notes, determined to speak. The hallway outside the council chamber smelled faintly of disinfectant and paper, the kind of air that felt sterile, official, final. The fluorescent lights hummed above, flickering every few seconds as if mocking the tension gathering in my chest. Rows of chairs stood empty. The door was locked. A printed notice hung crookedly. Meeting postponed due to scheduling conflict. No apology, no explanation, no date. I stood there for a long time, staring at the sign. My pulse thudded in my ears. After everything, the preparation, the humiliation, the courage it had taken to show up, they'd canceled it at the last minute. Or maybe they hadn't. Maybe this was how people like me were supposed to quit, quietly, politely, without ever being heard. "Ma'am, are you here for the rezoning hearing?" I turned. A woman in a navy sweater stood nearby, holding a stack of pamphlets. Her voice was kind but steady. "They do this a lot," she said. "Last-minute cancellations. It's a tactic. Makes you think it's not worth the fight." I blinked at her. "They just postponed it?" "Technically, yes," she said. "But don't let that stop you. I'm with the Elder Rights Group downtown. We track cases like yours." She pulled out a small voice recorder, switched it on, and placed it on the bench. The low hum mixed with the overhead buzzing, creating a strange rhythm in the empty hall. "I document these things," she said. "Every cancellation, every excuse. Helps later." For the first time in weeks, I felt less alone. "They won't listen to me," I said. "They don't have to yet," she replied. "You just need proof they didn't." I opened my folder and showed her the notice, the stamped seal, the letter from the county office. "It's all here," I said, my voice shaking. "They're trying to take my home." She nodded. "Then we'll make sure they do it on record." We stood there a while, her recording the echo of our voices, the empty hallway bearing witness. She handed me a card. "My name's Sarah. Call if they send another notice. We'll go together next time." Something in her calm gave me back a piece of myself. I left the building with her words repeating in my mind. "We'll go together next time." By the time I reached my car, dusk had started to fall. The street lamps flickered on one by one, throwing long shadows over the sidewalk. I sat behind the wheel, gripping the folder like a lifeline. For the first time, I believed I might still have a chance. That night, my phone rang. It was Mark. His tone was sharp, impatient, like a man who thought authority lived in his voice. "I heard you went to the county again," he said. I did. The hearing was postponed. You're wasting your time, he snapped. These people don't care, and you're making things worse. For who? I asked. For everyone, he said. Stop involving strangers in family matters. She's not a stranger, I said. She's helping me. You don't need help. You need to stop. There was a pause. I could hear Claire in the background, her voice low but firm. Then Mark spoke again, quieter this time, more dangerous. If you keep pushing, Mom, you'll regret it. I swallowed hard. Is that a threat? It's advice. He hung up. The silence that followed was heavier than any argument. I sat in the dark, staring at the blinking red light on my answering machine, the hum of the refrigerator filling the room. Every sound seemed amplified, hollow. I thought of Sarah's recorder, of her quiet defiance in that sterile hallway. We'll go together next time. The words steadied me. In the morning, I planned to review the documents again, make copies, send a formal complaint. But when I stepped outside, the mailbox door hung open. Empty. Every letter, every page, gone. Next morning, my mailbox was empty. Someone had taken the notice. The letter vanished, but the threat stayed. I stood at the gate, staring at the open mailbox, the hinge creaking slightly in the morning wind. The metal felt cold under my hand, almost accusatory. I'd checked the mail every day since the county notice had arrived. Now it was gone. No envelope, no trace, only the faint outline where it had been pinned. I walked back to the house and called the postal office. After explaining what happened, they sent an inspector that afternoon. He was polite but cautious, the kind of man who had seen too many quiet crimes disguised as misunderstandings. He took notes while I spoke, his pen tapping against the clipboard in even, steady beats. "You're sure the letter was delivered?" he asked. "It was there yesterday morning," I said, "stamped and sealed." He nodded. "We can confirm through the delivery log." An hour later, he returned my call. "It was signed for," he said, "yesterday at 10:42 a.m. "By who?" He hesitated. "Claire Walker." For a second, everything went still. "She doesn't live here," I said, though the words felt useless. "She listed herself as an authorized recipient." I gripped the edge of the counter, trying to steady my voice. "That's illegal," he sighed. "Someone's intercepting your mail. It happens in property disputes more than you'd think. You should file a theft report." When I hung up, the house felt colder, emptier. The silence pressed against my ears until I could hear my own heartbeat. Outside, a long shadow from the oak tree cut across the yard, slicing the mailbox in half. I watched it sway slightly in the breeze, half in sun, half in shade. It felt like a warning. They were inside every boundary I thought I had left. I drove to the post office and filled out the report. The form was long and formal, demanding details about what was taken, when, and by whom. I wrote carefully, refusing to leave a single line blank. "Do you want to authorize an investigation?" the clerk asked. "Yes," I said. "I want every record pulled." He slid a copy across the counter. "It'll take time," he warned. "I have time," I said. "What I don't have is trust." On the way home, I passed Claire's spa. The parking lot was full. Through the large glass windows, I saw her greeting clients, her laughter cutting through the air even from where I stood outside. I parked across the street for a moment, just watching. She looked free, untouched. I wanted to walk in and ask her why she needed to own everything, even my mail, but I didn't, not yet. When I got home, I checked my phone. There was a new message from Mark. "Mom, this has to stop," it read. "You're making a fool of yourself. People are talking." My hands trembled as I read it. I could almost hear his voice, half annoyed, half ashamed to be connected to me. I stared at the words for a long time before saving the message to my folder of evidence. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house felt deliberate. I imagined them sorting through my letters, laughing over what they found. Bills, notices, maybe even personal notes, each piece another chance to twist the knife deeper. I'd spent months fighting to prove I wasn't losing my mind, but they were making sure no one else believed that. I made tea and sat by the window, watching the dark road outside. The reflection of the mailbox glimmered faintly in the porch light. I caught sight of my own shadow beside it, blurred, elongated, almost ghost-like. That's what they wanted, to turn me into a ghost in my own life. But the theft changed something. Now I had proof that lines had been crossed. I wrote everything down: time, date, names. The inspector's warning echoed in my head. Someone's intercepting your mail. By morning, I decided to move my records to the bank, somewhere they couldn't touch them. I gathered my folder, the phone, the copies, even the photos I'd taken of the notice. I wanted every piece safe. When I reached for my purse, I noticed the card Sarah had given me, the volunteer from the Elder Rights Group. "Call if it gets worse," she'd said. I smiled faintly. "It already has," I whispered. That week, my bank account froze. My card declined for groceries. The cashier leaned closer, lowering her voice like she was embarrassed for me. "It says there's no balance." The people in line shifted, trying not to look. I fumbled with my phone, pulling up the account app. The screen showed a flat 0. Not a pending hold, not a mistake. Empty. I stepped aside, the sound of the register beeping behind me. I felt a metallic taste in my mouth, sharp and sour, the way fear feels when it hits the tongue. I left the cart there and walked out, gripping the useless card like it might still mean something. At the bank, the manager recognized me immediately. She guided me into her office, her polite tone fraying at the edges. "Let's take a look," she said. Her computer keys clicked softly as she pulled up my account. After a moment, she exhaled through her nose. "The joint account has been changed. The secondary owner updated the permissions yesterday." "Secondary owner?" I asked, though I already knew. She nodded. "Your son. He's listed as co-owner." I leaned forward. "He wasn't supposed to have full control." "You authorized him years ago," she said gently, as if I were fragile, "back when you added him for convenience." "I added him so he could help me with taxes," I said. My voice came out smaller than I wanted. "Not take everything." She hesitated, then clicked again. "All funds have been transferred to an external account. Same family name." "How much?" She turned the screen toward me. The number glowed. $84,600. My heart dropped. That was my savings, my insurance, the only money keeping me from losing the house. "There has to be a mistake," I said. Her voice softened. "I wish I could say there was." I sat there, the hum of the printer filling the silence between us. She printed the statement, slid it across the desk. "You'll want to keep this for your records." The paper felt heavier than it should have. Every line item was an accusation. When I left the branch, the sun was already low, the air thick with humidity. I parked by the curb, gripping the statement so tightly it crumpled. My phone buzzed. Another message from Mark. "You're making this worse for yourself," it read. I stared at the words until they blurred. The metallic tang returned, stronger this time. I wanted to reply, but what could I say that would cut through his certainty? That he'd turned into the kind of man who'd take everything from his own mother? Instead, I called the volunteer from the Elder Rights Group. Sarah answered on the first ring. "Tell me what happened," she said. I explained, my voice trembling between anger and disbelief. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. "This is financial isolation," she said finally. "It's what they do when they want control. First your property, then your voice, then your money. So what can I do?" "Document everything," she said. "Don't close the account yet. It's evidence now. But open a new one somewhere else, in your name only, and don't tell him." I nodded, though she couldn't see me. "He'll find out." "Then let him," she said. "He's already crossed the line. You can't keep pretending this is a misunderstanding." Her words settled in like cold truth. I ended the call and sat there a long time, staring at the bank receipt. My name was still printed beside his, but it meant nothing now. That night, I opened the drawer where I kept every document: copies of the deed, the rezoning notice, the postal report. Each one marked another step in their quiet theft. I added the bank statement on top, smoothing it flat. The stack had grown thick. It no longer looked like paper, it looked like ammunition. I realized then that silence had only helped them. I'd been patient, cautious, hoping reason would bring them back to decency. But there was no decency left to appeal to. I made tea and stood by the window, watching headlights pass on the road. The fear was still there, but beneath it, something new stirred. Resolve. "They want me quiet," I whispered. "But they don't get to write the ending." I turned on the lamp and opened my laptop. Sarah had told me once, "Sunlight is the best disinfectant." So I started typing, line by line, everything that had happened. The documents, the signatures, the stolen money, the lies. I wrote until my hands hurt, until the fear dulled into focus. When I was done, I stared at the email draft addressed to the local paper. I clicked attach, then pause. My hand hovered over the mouse. Then I hit send. I contacted the press. They published my story on the front page. I saw it first thing in the morning. Bold black letters under a photo of me standing on my porch, the headline clear enough to split my world in two. Mother alleges land theft by son. I read it 3 times before I could even breathe. The paper trembled in my hands. The flash from the reporter's camera still echoed in my mind. She'd come the night before, a young woman with steady eyes who listened without judgment. I'd told her everything, how I signed the deed, the rezoning notice, the frozen account. My voice broke more than once, but she didn't flinch. "You're not alone," she said quietly. Then the flash went off again, bright and quick, catching the porch behind me like proof that I still existed. Now it was out there for everyone to see. My story, my shame, my truth. By mid-morning, the phone began to ring. The first call came from a neighbor who hadn't spoken to me in months. "I saw the article," she said. "Good for you." Her voice trembled, as if she wasn't sure which side of history she wanted to stand on. Then came others, an old friend from church, a woman I didn't even know from across town. Some offered kind words, others whispered gossip disguised as concern. "It's brave," one said, "but are you sure it's wise?" By noon, the story had spread online. Comments multiplied, each one a little louder than the last. People argued, speculated, picked apart details that weren't theirs to touch. The porch light above my door flickered as the sun dipped behind the clouds. I sat on the steps, the paper folded beside me like a shield. The first text came from Mark. "Mom, what have you done?" I didn't answer. The next one followed a minute later. "You don't understand how this looks. You're making a fool of yourself." I typed a reply, then erased it. Instead, I placed the phone face down on the railing. By evening, Claire took to social media. Her post was polished, rehearsed. She smiled in the photo, her hand resting on Mark's shoulder. "We love our family and respect our elders," she wrote. But sadly, confusion and age can make things complicated. The comments flooded in, supportive, pitying, cruel. One read, "So sad she's being manipulated by outsiders." Another said, "She should be grateful her son even helps her." The words felt like a knife turning slowly. They weren't just questioning my story, they were erasing it. The reporter called that night to check on me. "There's a lot of reaction online," she said gently. "You okay?" "I don't know," I admitted. "I thought telling the truth would feel like freedom." "It will," she said, "but first it feels like exposure." I looked out toward the field where my husband had once planted wheat. The earth was bare now, stripped clean, waiting for something to grow again. "I didn't think it would hurt this much," I said. She was quiet for a moment, then said, "You started something that can't be buried again." After the call, I sat on the porch until the stars came out. The air carried the faint smell of rain. Across the street, a car slowed, then sped up. I felt watched, but I didn't move. The newspaper lay open beside me, the picture catching the porch light in a sharp flash of white. For the first time, I wasn't hiding. But the cost was already climbing. My phone buzzed again. voicemail from an unknown number. When I played it, a cold voice filled the air. "You should have kept this private," it said. "You're going to regret it." I deleted it, but the words lingered. Every fight so far had been quiet, behind doors, in offices, over papers. Now it was public, uncontrolled, unstoppable. And once something's public, it can't be taken back. I folded the paper, placed it on the nightstand, and turned off the lamp. The house felt different, hollow but alive. For the first time in months, I slept without fear of forgetting what they'd done. Morning came with another knock at the door. I opened it to find a man in uniform holding an envelope. A court summons arrived 2 days later. It smelled of polished wood and judgment. The courtroom was colder than I expected, every surface gleaming, every sound too sharp. The rows behind me filled with whispers, the low murmur of strangers waiting to see which story would hold. I clutched the folder in my lap, the edges soft from use. It held everything that mattered: copies, letters, my only defense. They'd sued me for defamation and asset damage, claiming I'd tarnished their names. I'd spent the night before reading the summons over and over until the words stopped making sense. Mother alleges land theft by son. Now they called it libel. Claire sat at the plaintiff's table, her hair perfectly set, her hand resting on Mark's arm. When they looked at me, it wasn't anger I saw. It was satisfaction. I realized then this wasn't about money anymore. It was about erasure. My public defender leaned in. "Keep your answers short. Tell the truth, nothing more." His voice was low, calm. "Don't let them bait you." "I won't," I whispered. When the judge entered, the gavel struck once, a clean, echoing sound that made my heart stutter. The scent of varnished wood hung thick in the air. I stared at the bench, the flags, the high ceiling. It felt like standing inside a verdict before it was spoken. The clerk read out my name, and a few people gasped. I didn't turn to see who. Maybe neighbors, maybe readers from the article. The reporter who'd written it sat in the back, pen ready, her camera bag by her feet. I took a slow breath. I wasn't here for sympathy. I was here for the truth. Mark's lawyer started first. His voice had the slick rhythm of someone used to winning. "My clients have been publicly defamed," he said. "The defendants' baseless accusations have caused real harm to their business and their reputation." He gestured toward them with theatrical precision. "They are good people, trying to care for a family member who's become unstable." A ripple went through the room. My stomach turned. My lawyer rose. "We dispute every word," he said. "The evidence will show the plaintiff gained control of property and finances through manipulation, not care." When it was my turn to testify, my legs shook. I walked to the stand, placed my hand on the worn Bible, and swore to tell the truth. My voice cracked at first, but steadied when I saw the folded newspaper sitting in the evidence pile, the same one that had started all this. The questions came fast. "Did you publicly accuse your son of theft?" "Yes." "Did you provide proof before doing so?" "I provided documents to the county." "But you spoke to the press first?" "Yes." "So you sought attention, not justice?" "No, I sought witnesses." Every line felt like a trap. I stayed calm, each word chosen carefully. When they brought up my age, implying confusion, I gripped the railing. "I may forget what day it is," I said softly, "but I remember who I trusted." A murmur ran through the audience. Even the judge's eyes flickered toward me. The opposing lawyer smirked. "You claim your son altered the deed. Do you have proof of this alleged forgery?" I nodded. "I have the signed transfer form and the clause his lawyer inserted." He spread his hands. "Then produce it." I looked at my attorney, who reached into his briefcase, pulling out a manila folder. He handed it to the bailiff. The paper rustled loudly in the quiet room as it made its way to the bench. The judge flipped through it slowly, the gavel's handle resting against the wood. "Clause 14, she read aloud. "No revocation under goodwill." She looked up. "Who drafted this?" "His legal counsel," I said. The lawyer for Mark and Claire stood abruptly. "Your Honor, That document has no bearing on the current case. It was signed voluntarily years prior." "Sit down," the judge interrupted. "I'll decide what bears relevance here." Claire shifted in her seat. Mark looked at his hands, his jaw tight. For the first time, he wouldn't meet my eyes. The judge continued flipping through the pages, each turn louder than the last. I caught a faint reflection of the overhead lights glinting off the polished bench. My pulse quickened. Something in her expression changed, curiosity mixed with suspicion. She paused. "Mrs. Walker, where is the original deed?" I hesitated. My breath caught. My lawyer leaned closer, his whisper barely audible. "She's asking for proof of title. The original copy." "I don't have it," I said. "It was taken." The judge's eyes narrowed. "Taken by whom?" I swallowed hard, staring across the room at Mark. "By the man who promised to protect it." A quiet settled, heavy and still. The judge's hand rested on the gavel again. Then the judge asked for the original deed. It was folded, worn, but it saved me. The clerk carried it in with both hands, sealed in a clear sleeve as if it were something fragile. My breath caught as soon as I saw the corner of the old paper peeking through. The deed. The one they said was lost, the one that had started everything. The judge adjusted her glasses, signaling for it to be placed on the bench. Every creak of that room felt louder than the last. The folder that had followed me from office to office, now in the hands of the court, seemed heavier than it ever had before. The clerk peeled the sleeve open and laid the document flat. "Recovered from county archives," he said. "Original deed, dated June 14th. The sound of paper sliding across the wood made everyone lean forward. The courtroom was so quiet, I could hear my own pulse in my ears. The judge studied it for a long moment, then she pointed. "That date? Has it been altered?" Her clerk stepped closer with a magnifier. "Yes, Your Honor. The ink here is darker, slightly misaligned. The number 3 was written over what appears to have been an 8. I gripped the edge of the table. I remembered the day I'd signed it years ago. My pen had been blue. The one on that page was black. Mark's lawyer shifted uneasily. "Your Honor, I'm sure there's a reasonable explanation. Old documents fade." The judge cut him off. "Old ink does not rewrite itself." He froze. Claire's expression cracked. Mark leaned back in his chair, his jaw tight. For the first time, he wasn't looking at me. My lawyer stood. "Your Honor, this document was submitted to the registry with the altered date 2 years later, corresponding with the rezoning request under Ms. Claire Bennett's name. We have certified copies to compare." The judge nodded. "Proceed." He handed over 2 sheets, side by side. Even from where I sat, I could see it. The original date, faint but intact. The second bold and wrong. My chest tightened. The truth was there, plain as day. "Who had access to the original when it was altered?" the judge asked. "The son, Your Honor," the clerk said quietly. "He signed for the file during a property audit." A collective murmur spread through the room. I caught the reporter scribbling faster than she could breathe. I didn't move. I couldn't. The judge looked straight at Mark. "Did you alter this document?" His lawyer jumped in. "My client declines to answer without further review." The judge frowned. "That's not how this works. You've brought a civil case against your mother. Now you face a potential felony." Mark's shoulders stiffened. Claire whispered something to him, but he didn't respond. He just stared down at the table, his hand trembling. I felt the air shift, the balance of power slipping. For months, they'd cornered me with words, papers, and silence. Now the paper was on my side. The judge turned to me. "Do you wish to make a statement for the record?" My voice shook at first. I was told I'd lost my memory, that I didn't understand what I'd signed. But I remember every signature. I remember who stood beside me when I did it. I glanced at Mark. "And it wasn't her." The judge nodded. "That will be entered into record." The courtroom buzzed again. Someone coughed, someone whispered. The reporter's camera clicked once, a small flash catching the silver of the court seal. The judge lifted her gavel. Based on this evidence, this case will not proceed as filed. It appears material fraud may have occurred. The matter will be deferred for investigation by the county. The words hit the air like a verdict. My defender exhaled quietly beside me. Across the aisle, Mark's lawyer sank into his seat, the fight draining from him. Claire reached for Mark's hand, but he pulled away. As I gathered my papers, the clerk carefully folded the deed and returned it to its sleeve. I ran my fingers over the plastic. Through it, I could feel the rough grain of the old paper, the uneven line of the signature that had nearly cost me everything. The judge stood. "This hearing is adjourned." The gavel fell once more, steady and final. When I turned, I saw faces in the crowd, neighbors, strangers, even Sarah from the advocacy group. She gave a small nod. I nodded back. Outside, reporters waited near the courthouse steps, cameras ready. I walked past them without speaking, clutching the folder close. The sky had that gray, waiting color that always comes before rain. For the first time, I didn't feel powerless. I felt proven. The county opened a fraud inquiry that afternoon. Investigators came with clipboards and quiet voices. They arrived early, unannounced, their plain cars parked along the gravel path by the fence. I watched from the porch as they stepped out, 2 men and a woman, each with a county badge clipped to their coats. Their expressions were neutral, their movements precise. They were here for truth, not sympathy. The taller one introduced himself, holding out a hand. "We're reviewing the fraud inquiry," he said. "We'll need your full cooperation." "I've waited months for someone to ask," I told him. They spread their files across my dining table, marking each document with yellow tags. The papers looked small under their hands, but I knew what they carried. Years of trust turned into evidence. The faint sound of their pens moving filled the room, steady and exact. They questioned everything. The timeline, the witnesses, the day the signature changed. One investigator asked, "Did you ever authorize them to alter this deed?" "No," I said. "Never. I signed once, and that was the only time." He nodded without looking up, writing it down. The sound of pens scratching against paper reminded me of the day I'd first signed away the land. That same rhythm, only this time it was theirs, not mine. They moved to the notary record. The woman flipped open a binder. "There's a gap here," she murmured. "The log entry for that date is missing." The lead investigator frowned. "Check the following week." She did, and there it was. My name, but a different date, squeezed between unrelated entries. "Someone backfilled this," she said quietly. "Sloppy work." I felt a rush of heat in my chest. It wasn't satisfaction, not yet, just the beginning of being believed. They took statements from the courthouse clerk, the planner, and the notary. I heard them make calls from my kitchen, voices low but firm. Every so often, one of them would step outside to speak privately. Through the window, I could see the badges catching the afternoon light. The fence, once a symbol of isolation, now framed the scene like a boundary finally guarded. When they finished the first round of interviews, the woman investigator stayed behind. "We'll cross-check the notary logs and property transfers from that quarter," she said. "If there's a pattern, we'll find it." I nodded. "It's not just about me anymore." Her pen paused mid-air. "No," she said. "It's not." Days passed in silence after they left. Each morning I checked the mailbox, expecting a letter, a notice, anything. Nothing came. Even the neighbors seemed quieter, their curiosity cooling into something like respect. I spent hours on the porch, my hands folded over the folder that once held every lie they'd built. The waiting was its own kind of trial. Then, on the 4th day, a car pulled up again, the same county seal on the door. The lead investigator stepped out, holding a thin envelope. His expression was different this time, less guarded, more certain. "We've confirmed it," he said. I stood. "Confirmed what?" He handed me the envelope. The forgery wasn't isolated. Claire altered 3 separate filings over the course of 1 year. We verified it through handwriting analysis and registry timestamps. The notary's license will be reviewed, and the falsified record will be voided. I stared at the paper, his words echoing in my head. So, it's real. It's finally real. He nodded once. The county has recognized the claim. Your property rights will be restored pending restitution. My throat tightened. Restitution, I repeated. That's what they called it. He smiled faintly, as if he understood what that word really meant. Justice isn't fast, he said, but it does leave a mark. When he left, the silence returned, but it felt different. Not empty, earned. Inside, the faint sound of my pen scratching echoed from the table where I signed his acknowledgement form. I listened for a moment, the rhythm calm and final. For months, every document had been used against me. Now, each page carried my defense. I stacked the files neatly, the county seal visible on top, and set them beside the window. The air outside felt clean, like something old had finally lifted. I looked at the fields beyond the fence, the same ground that had once been signed away. Soon, I thought, they would bear my name again. The court date was set for restitution. He couldn't meet my eyes when the gavel fell. The courtroom went silent, the air heavy and still, as if everyone had forgotten to breathe. The judge's voice cut through it, measured, deliberate, final. This court orders restitution in the amount of $150,000. The original property deed shall be restored to its rightful owner. For a moment I couldn't move. I just stared ahead, my hands gripping the edge of the table. The sunlight through the high windows struck the polished floor, bouncing off the brass plaques and scattering in sharp, clean streaks. The glare stung my eyes, but I didn't look away. It felt like truth made visible. Across the aisle, Claire sat rigid, her lawyer whispering something she didn't seem to hear. Mark's face was pale. His hands fidgeted in his lap, twisting his wedding ring round and round. The sound of it scraping against his finger was faint but steady, like the ticking of time that had finally run out. The judge continued, her tone level but firm. The funds are to be held in trust until cleared through county review. Any further challenge will be subject to penalty. My lawyer leaned toward me. It's over, he whispered. I nodded, though it didn't feel real yet. Months of hearings, letters, and sleepless nights all boiled down to a few sentences that returned what was mine. But what no one could return was the cost of it. Mark finally looked up, his eyes rimmed red. I didn't mean for it to go this far, he said softly. I turned to him. You did. He flinched. For once there was no defense, no explanation ready on his tongue, only the echo of his own choice staring back at him. The judge gathered her notes, stacking them neatly. Court adjourned. The gavel came down with one clean strike, a sound like closure, like the final page of a long, cruel book being shut. People began to rise, murmuring under their breath. The reporter in the back scribbled fast, the tip of her pen catching the last words of the verdict. The clerk handed me a copy of the court order, one thin sheet, embossed with the county seal, heavy with meaning. I folded it carefully, slipping it into my folder beside the old deed. As I stood, my knees trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the strange lightness that follows when a long wait finally lifts. The hallway outside was filled with that same white glare, bright, cutting, and honest. I paused by the door, hearing Mark behind me, his voice breaking as he spoke to his lawyer. She'll never forgive me, he said. No, I thought, and that's not what this was about. I stepped into the corridor, the sound of footsteps echoing off marble. The air smelled faintly of polish and paper dust. My lawyer caught up beside me. We'll process the restitution paperwork by the end of the week, he said. The county needs 2 signatures, then it's settled. I nodded again. $150,000, I murmured, testing the number. It didn't feel like money. It felt like an acknowledgement, a written apology from the system itself. He smiled faintly. Justice isn't always perfect, he said, but this one came close. Outside, the sunlight hit harder. Reporters had already gathered by the steps. I could hear the shuffle of cameras, the low hum of questions waiting to be thrown. My lawyer shielded me with a hand, but I wasn't hiding anymore. I stopped for a moment at the top of the stairs, feeling the warmth on my face. Someone shouted a question I didn't answer. My focus stayed on the courthouse doors, the heavy bronze reflecting that same glare from before, sharp, unforgiving, but pure. I thought of Mark sitting inside, the ring still on his finger, the verdict still ringing in his ears. I didn't hate him anymore. That was the difference between winning and surviving. As I took the first step down, I felt the crowd shift, their attention following. The sound of shutters clicking filled the air, a strange chorus of light and judgment intertwined. When I walked out, cameras flashed again. I walked the boundary lines, alone but free. The air carried that soft warmth that only comes after a storm, the kind that makes everything still but alive again. The grass brushed against my shoes, the earth solid beneath each step. The fields looked the same as before, but I wasn't. At the registrar's office that morning, the woman behind the counter smiled faintly. "It's ready," she said. She slid a thick envelope across the counter, her tone almost reverent. Inside lay the reissued deed, my name printed clearly, the ink fresh and unshaken. "You're its owner again," she added softly. I held it in my hands for a long moment. The paper was warm from her touch, yet cool in my grip, a small, weightless thing that had cost nearly everything. I traced the seal with my thumb, remembering how easily it had once been taken, how quickly a signature had become a weapon. Now it was a shield. Outside, the light stretched wide across the fields. The warmth fell over the soil like forgiveness. I knelt and pressed my palm into the ground, feeling the grainy mix of dirt and memory. It wasn't about reclaiming land anymore. It was about reclaiming myself. I thought of Mark. The last message from him had come 2 weeks ago. Just 4 words. "I'm sorry for everything." I hadn't replied. There were no words that could rebuild what had been broken. Some wounds were meant to scar, not disappear. Still, I remembered the look on his face in court, the way he couldn't lift his eyes when the gavel fell. That image would stay with me, not as revenge, but as a measure of consequence. It was the sound of a cycle ending. The registrar came out briefly, her clipboard tucked under her arm. "The county's updated the record," she said. "You'll receive the certified copy in 3 days." "Thank you," I said. She smiled again, hesitating as if to say more. Then she just nodded. "It's good to see a fair outcome once in a while." I watched her leave, her car pulling onto the main road. The hum faded, and quiet filled the air. Not the heavy silence of shame or waiting. This was clean, complete. For months, every sound had felt sharp, intrusive. Now even the silence had texture, like soft cloth settling over an open wound. I walked the same path I had years ago, when I'd first trusted everything away. The fence still stood, weathered but holding. The gate creaked as it swung open, and I smiled. The hinges had always needed oil. In the distance, the house waited. Old wood, chipped paint, a sagging porch that had carried decades of laughter and loss. I paused at the door, resting my hand against it. The warmth of the sun followed me, wrapping around my shoulders as if the place itself was welcoming me home. Inside, the air smelled faintly of dust and renewal. On the kitchen table, I laid down the new deed beside the old one, the paper edges overlapping like generations of truth correcting themselves. The difference was small, almost invisible. Just a name restored, a line rewritten. But to me, it was everything. I thought of the lawyer's warning months before. You can't undo a gift. Maybe not. But you can undo a lie. The clock above the window ticked softly. I hadn't realized it still worked. Its steady rhythm filled the space where accusation and doubt once lived. As the afternoon light poured through the window, I took out my pen. My hand didn't shake this time. I signed my name across the acknowledgement line with the same steady grip I'd once used in that cold office months ago, only now the motion meant something different. "I signed with steady hands," I whispered. hearing my own words return like a quiet echo, rooted in the soil outside, carried by the breeze through the open door. The past didn't vanish, it simply settled. The land stretched wide under a forgiving sky, and for the first time in years, I felt the weight of peace instead of loss. The land was mine, and so was my life. Did you enjoy this story? Tell me which city you're listening from. I read every comment. If the story touched you, you can support the channel with a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this every day. Your encouragement really helps. I'd love to hear your thoughts and what moments stayed with you. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's more on the channel as well. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. See you in the next life story with respect and gratitude.